Good Samaritan obviously included a phrase that apparently the cast had hoped that the fans would catch on. Apparently, though, it wasn't as big of a deal, though, to the fans as something like "these pretzels are making me thirsty," or "not that there's anything wrong with that," or the yada yada yada. But it caught on to me because this is another one of my personal favorite episodes, The Good Samaritan. And that's because you shouldn't say God bless you. God bless you. I'll say bless. It's bless. God bless you. You should say you're so good looking. But a good episode. So there's a couple stories that happened in this episode. It wasn't a completely one-sided episode and such. It starts off with Jerry doing something that some of us do nowadays. Is he was on the phone with Elaine while driving his car on his car phone, because back then you had to pay to have a car phone. Now, of course, we have cell phones, electronic devices that you can connect to Bluetooth, so you can still do the same thing, except you don't have to pay for the phone when you buy the phone. But Jerry's on the phone with Elaine, and first he had this one guy who wanted to try to move over to Jerry's lane. He lets him in. He then starts yelling and saying, "You didn't give me my thank you wave," and such. But then he sees another car sideswipe a parked car and drives off. So Elaine tells him he's got to follow that car. Jerry, of course, is like, "But you never know who it could be, though." He goes, "You got to follow that car, because if not, you're yellow." So Jerry, wanting to prove he's a tough guy, follows the car, who pulls over not far from his building. So Jerry gets out, and he's about to tell the guy, "Hey, excuse me, I saw that you hit that car back there," until the guy steps out of the car, and it's a very attractive woman, and Jerry just quickly, changes his direction of his statement, and basically just goes over the woman's head that, yeah, this guy was about to, bust me, but at the same time, my looks were good enough to turn him on. Of course, though, Elaine thought that Jerry was following the guy. But Jerry ends up going on a date with this woman that night, and of course, he didn't turn her in, even though he keeps feeling guilty that he should. So he's at the apartment next day talking to George about it, but of course he doesn't want to say anything to Elaine, because he knows Elaine will think he's be disappointed in him. Of course, he won't have to tell anybody else either, because at the same time, everybody else will be saying, "You should have turned her in. You should have turned her in." So Elaine comes in, and then she asks about the hit and run. So Jerry makes up some story where he followed the car into Queens, and went across the bridge until he got out of the car, and Jerry got out of the car and tried to confront him. And then he was going to say that's basically it, but then George tries to play along a little further and say, "Tell him about the shoving." And then Jerry said that the guy lost his temper and he had him up against a wall, so he got into a karate stance, and the guy backed off, he said, basically. Which Elaine just bought it all. Then Kramer comes in, and Elaine basically, brags about it to Kramer. Kramer comes in, and Elaine brags about Jerry's experience with Kramer. And Kramer's like, "Good for you. These people that do that are sick." But while they're in the car, before the hit and run happened, Elaine said she ran into a friend of hers, Robin Sandusky. Yeah, that name makes me cringe too, especially also we have a character named Jerry, but we're not going to go there. So Robin asked Jerry if he wanted to go with her to dinner with Robin on, I think it was Friday. The night before, Jerry said yes, but this time he says, "No, I have a date." And Elaine's like, "But I thought you said you were free." Jerry goes, "I know, but we just met." So obviously, something had to happen between point A and point B. So then Elaine didn't want to go by herself, because she didn't want to be there with just a married couple, because she felt like like a third wheel, basically. So she asked George to come with her, and she offers to pay, and George's like, "You want to pay? I'm there." So they go to the dinner. And at the same time, Jerry went out with on Friday with Angela, the hit and run lady, and they're in the car, and they're just making small talk. Of course, Jerry kept referring all their conversations to hit and run people, how it's wrong to do this and that, but again, it went over Angela's head, and they just kept making out in the car while eating ice cream. Um, so then, meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Elaine, George, Robin, and Robin's husband, Michael, were all having dinner. George, though, wasn't really paying attention to the conversation at all. He was just, like, in his own element, eating everything in sight. While Elaine, of course, wanted to make herself look better than them, brags about how she recently went out with a bullfighter named Eduardo Caroccio. And obviously it was making the married couple laugh and such. And again, it was all mainly about that, basically, until Robin sneezed. There was a pause, silence for a couple seconds. George, being polite, says, "God bless you." And then Robin goes, "Ooh, thank you." George says, "I wasn't going to say anything," but he wasn't going to open up his mouth, which, of course, Michael takes offense to that. He's like, "You think you're special because you say God bless you?" And they got into a fight. And George's like, "I'm not special. No. My mom." He's squirming out of this. He's like, "My mom always told me that I'm not special," basically. And then Robin's telling Michael to cut it out. Michael's just like, "What, you're taking his side?" He goes, "No, I'm not." "Whose side are you taking?" "Well, I'm not taking your side." And then she sneezes again. George gives him a chance to say God bless you. Obviously, it seems like he didn't. So, meanwhile, back at Jerry's apartment that night, George is there, and he's telling him what happened. And of course, Jerry goes, which of course would be a silly analogy that my dad and I would come up with, or my whole family in general. What am I kidding? We would do some weird analogy like this. He asks him, the question was, did you leave a space for the husband to say God bless you, which George did, and basically saying, because after a few seconds, that God bless you is up for grabs. But then he says, the only thing I can think of, though, is, maybe she's one of those multiple sneezers. And then he was waiting for the next sneeze. George said he didn't think she was a multiple sneezer because she sneezed later on in the conversation. And then Jerry said, well, maybe she's having an off night. So then Elaine shows up. And then Kramer would later. But Elaine, of course, comes in and says, if it ain't Mr. Gesundheit. And then George was like, I was so wrong with saying God bless you. I was raised to say God bless you. Jerry sneezes behind him, and he goes, oh, shut up. And then, Elaine says, oh, it's just a stupid superstition. And then Jerry mentions the thing, but, to be more polite, you shouldn't say God bless you. Instead, you should say, you're so good looking. And then George, I think, heads into... Well, then, no. Then Elaine says that Robin had called and she left a message, and she wanted George to give her a call. And George is like, why would she want me to call her? And he goes, I don't know, I guess to apologize. That's why she called me. He goes, okay, I'll give her a call. So he goes into Jerry's bedroom to give her a call. Jerry and Elaine sit down to start watching Entertainment Tonight. Kramer, though, in the first scene, I forgot to mention this, he had mentioned something about how the other night he was watching Entertainment Tonight, but then all of a sudden he blacked out and hit his head, had this big gash on his forehead. He didn't know why. So of course Kramer came in while George was in the bedroom, and as they're watching Entertainment Tonight, all of a sudden he starts seizing, and Michael Richards just went. And let me step back for a second. This is also a fun fact, the only episode they let Jason Alexander direct. He directed this episode. And Michael Richards was not really, saying much, obviously he had to have a seizure. So, obviously, even though he's having a seizure, they still wanted to make, a little bit like a physical comedy out of it. But not, insulting for people who are epileptics. So, he says, I'll play this very simple, but, whenever, you wouldn't even practice any course on camera, and one of my favorite quotes by Michael Richards. I practice things off to the side, but once the camera rolled, stuff just happened. He broke chairs, he broke lamps, he apparently tore the leg off of the couch. He just, he went all out on that thing. So he started seizing, and then Jerry and Elaine turned off Entertainment Tonight, and they realized that Kramer was going crazy, and then he said he hit his head again, and then Elaine mentions, wait a minute, the last time this happened to you was Mary Hart's voice on TV. And then Kramer said, yeah. And Elaine said, "That's it. Mary Hart's voice is for some reason giving you seizures," which apparently was based on a true incident that of an actual case that was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine. A woman named Diane Neal was suffering epileptic seizures from hearing Mary Hart's voice. Why? I don't know that full details yet, but that's the reason why. George, meanwhile, comes back out, and Elaine's like, what happened? And then George says, well, she apologized, but then she also asked if she wanted to get together on Wednesday. Maybe she just wants to talk. And then Elaine starts saying stuff about, married women don't just get together. They have affairs. And then the more George talked about it, he sounded like he was going to go through with it. He goes, no, maybe I won't. No, I'll just just go over and talk to her, and that'll be it. And then Kramer happens to mention, which of course puts Jerry's mindset about the whole thing of Angela in a whole new perspective, how the woman whose car got hit was this woman across the street, the blonde with the blue sweatpants, which Jerry admits he's had his eye on her for a long time, and now this will be an excuse for him to go say that he knows who did it, and it'll be a good excuse for him to go, get her attention. He goes over, and of course she says, well, God bless you, and she does a thing where she puts his hand on his shoulder and slowly moves it down. Him and George were saying that how they enjoy when women do that early in the episode whenever Angela did it to him. So obviously this put Jerry in a whole different mindset. Now he wants to turn in Angela. Which first off, and after the commercial break, George goes over to Robin's and they have an affair. And George is like, what am I doing? I committed adultery. And then Robin goes, no, you didn't commit adultery. I did. If it wouldn't have done with you, it would have done it with somebody else. And then, obviously, she was just saying how, she's just not happy with Michael. In a deleted scene, they were talking about, how they met, how her and Michael met, was at a party, and then George admits that they have a better, how they met story. He talked about that earlier, whenever Jerry first told him about Angela, and it was said, how, good relationships have a good how we met story, and such. But in the meantime, Michael called Elaine. Elaine did not know that Robin was telling Michael that she was going to be with Elaine that day. And it threw her off guard until she realized what was going on. And then basically she called and said, is he with your bald friend? And he basically just said some profanity about how he's going to sew his ass to his face, break his limbs, and hurt his joints, and basically all of this. And then he sneezes on the phone, and Elaine goes, "You're so good looking." Of course, then Angela and Jerry break up because Jerry, wants to turn her in, and she basically threatens him pretty vile also. And at the same time, Elaine walks in. As she leaves, Elaine finds out, that what was going on for real. And then George stops by, and then Elaine asks George if he checked his answer machine yet. And she told him what happened with Michael, which George freaks out why couldn't you lie? Why couldn't you lie? Is it that hard? And then Jerry goes, it's not that hard, really. But again, Elaine was first off, she didn't tell me that she was using me as an excuse, but two, why just go ahead and sleep with her? And then George's I wasn't until you got all riled up about that bullfighter affair you claim you have and whatnot. And then Jerry's whoa, hold the phone. Who's this bullfighter? And then basically, because Elaine made Jerry, got on Jerry about Angela, Jerry is now getting on her about Eduardo Carocchio. And then also Jerry would go over to Becky's apartment and basically say he was gonna make a check. He was gonna make a check out for the damage, and he was gonna pay. And he was gonna have the person who did the hit and run pay him back. Of course, Becky took that as he was the one who did it, and she basically rejected him for his date offer. And of course, before she closed the door in his face, she sneezed, and Jerry goes, "You are so good looking." She's like, "Thank you," and just slams the door in his face. Ending scene: George is saying he wants to go on the road with Jerry for a few weeks because he thinks Michael's out to get him, basically, and he needs to get out of the city for a little bit. Which I'm sure, he would have done for a while longer. But whatever happened to Michael and Robin, I have no clue. Wherever the George and Robin, I have no clue. But then Kramer walks in. At first, he thought that Jerry, again, he heard that what happened with Jerry and Becky, and he thought that Jerry was the one who did the hit and run. And then Jerry says, "I didn't hit her. I was only doing it to cover up for someone else," and which I assuming Angela didn't pay him back the money, but why would she, with how cruel she was? But I'm sure Jerry was out like $876 or whatever heck it was. And then Kramer believed him. He says, "Oh, this is good because tonight I got a date with her." And then Jerry's like, "How did you get a date with Becky Gelke, whatever her name is?" So Kramer goes over. He's all moose and has hair and has flowers. She opens up the door, but then at the same time, Entertainment Tonight was on, and then Mary Hart's voice was playing. So Kramer started seizing again. Unfortunately, that's how the episode ended. Like I said, a lot of sources are saying that they wanted "You're so good looking" to catch on. It's not as popular, of course, as some of the other catchphrases, but it caught on to me, so I'm one of the minority. Like I said, this was one of the few episodes, that's the only episode that Jason Alexander was given the opportunity to direct, which he said in the inside look, of course, he was more familiar with the directing for theater, never really was familiar with directing with cameras and whatnot. But yeah, and obviously, of course, the title "Good Samaritan" is based off of the biblical reference of Good Samaritan, when someone from another people helped another people, basically, in the Bible, which of course I know the story. And of course, this is also a foreshadow because in the finale, of course, we all know that the four of them were arrested for breaking the Good Samaritan law, which we'll talk about that, of course, much further down the road. But yeah, that's the Good Samaritan episode. Again, another one of my favorites for sure. Next one, I think, is The Letter, I think. Get a little Neil Simon here. And a little baseball rivalry as well. So, this next one should be good. And also, a very important portrait, or photograph, or whatever, painting, that actually is on my bedroom door, will also be revealed in the next review, The Letter. So once again, guys, what are your thoughts on the Good Samaritan episode? Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Slap a like on the video. Subscribe for more content to my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well, @DemandAirBoy93. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody. Yeah, no one will surprise. There's no